Good afternoon and welcome to ICMS Open Day 2020. For the next 15 minutes, I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about how to build a strong personal brand. But before I do that, I would love to introduce myself to you all. So my name is Jackson Godley. I'm an ICMS alumni student and I'm currently the Talent and Outreach Program Specialist at Google in Sydney. So a very fun role, been there for about 4 years. And my job is to essentially find the next generation of talent for Google. So I work very closely with students like yourselves and universities, doing a lot of networking, presentations at universities, and then hopefully hiring students into either intern or graduate roles at Google. So before I get into the presentation, just thought I'd do a quick snapshot of my career journey from my humble beginnings when I started at ICMS back in 2010 to where I am now. So I started my degree in 2010 at ICMS. It was a Bachelor of Business majoring in hospitality management. And I was lucky enough during that time to do my industry training at the Hyatt Regency Hotel in London, which was an incredible experience, something that I would highly recommend to any student considering doing international opportunities. I was there for 9 months working in the banquets and events department. It was my first hotel role, but something that I thoroughly enjoyed. I then graduated to ICMS in 2012 and got my first full-time role, which was at the Sheraton on the Park Hotel in Sydney, where I worked in front office for 2 years. I then moved to the 4 Points by Sheraton Hotel into a human resources role. So I'd got a fair idea for the different departments of hotels and obviously working in operational roles, but HR was something that I'd studied at ICMS, a couple of subjects, and was something that I really enjoyed and wanted to learn more about. So I was lucky to move into a human resources coordinator role, which was very much HR generalist work, so working in recruitment, training and development, and other things as well. So that really opened up my eyes to the world of HR and specifically the world of recruitment. And it was then that I actually moved out of hotels and got my role at Google. So you're probably thinking, how does a hospitality student go from working in hotels and ending up working in one of the largest tech companies? Well, I was quite lucky that I had a friend that was working there who referred me into the role. Didn't really think much of it. Wasn't something that I really thought that I would even get. Had a couple of interviews, and before I knew it, 4 years later, here I am now. So let's get into the thick of the presentation, building your personal brand. So I'm going to go through my top 5 tips for how you can build a really strong brand. But before I do that, let's start from the beginning and what really is, a personal brand. So Jeff Bezos, CEO of Amazon, says, your personal brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. So your personal brand is essentially a summation of what other people think about you, what their perceptions of you are, based on your behaviours and actions that you demonstrate. So this is something that you should really build from day one of your studies. I work with a lot of final year students and this concept of personal branding is quite new to them. And that's why I think the earlier that you can build your own personal brand and know what your personal brand is, the better. So think about the top 3, traits or characteristics that you really want people, when they say your name, these are the top 3 things that they think about. So start to think about what those are. And then obviously the next step is really selling that personal brand. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about how you can do that. One thing to note, the hospitality industry, but even the tech industry that I'm working in now, is actually a very small industry. And you'd be surprised the people that you meet in your studies that you then form connections with later on in life. So it's really important that personal brand is strong from the first time you interact with someone. So tip number 2 would be saying yes. Now, I say this with a caveat. Say yes to as many things, grasp as many opportunities as you can, particularly while you're studying at ICMS. Like the options are really unlimited. There's so many things that you can get involved in and so many things that you can say yes to. But at the same time, you don't want to say yes to too many things. And as important it is to say yes, it's also sometimes important to say no to things as well. You don't want to burn yourself out. But I think one of the things that I loved about ICMS, as I mentioned, is the fact that so many doors open to you. There's so many opportunities outside your core studies that you can get involved in, whether that's Functions, I got a lot of experience working on external functions. I was a class rep as well. I did peer mentoring and tutoring at studies. And this is kind of something that's continued on with me now working at Google, where I just try and learn as much as I can and put my hand in as many pies as possible. And nothing bad can come from saying yes. Even if you feel uncomfortable and you feel like there's an opportunity which is slightly outside of your comfort zone, I'd highly recommend to just throw caution to the wind and give it a go. Richard Branson says, if someone offers you an amazing opportunity and you're not sure if you can do it, say yes and then learn how to do it later. And I can think of a couple of times in my career where this has really rung true to me. The first thing would be when I took the industry training role at the Hyatt in London. Now, one thing I probably need to tell you is I was definitely not the best practical student at ICMS. The theory side was pretty good, but when it came to practical classes, whether that be working in the grand dining room, being a chef at the college, not my strongest point. So I think for me it was a really big move to a hotel, my first hotel role on the other side of the world, where I didn't know anyone, I had no family or friends. I was, I think, 18 at the time. So it was a huge step outside of my comfort zone. And don't get me wrong, there were times where I questioned the decision and felt homesick and wanted to come home. But I'm so glad that I pushed through, because the connections that I made and the experience, even just in that short 9-month window that I gained, was, you really can't put a price on it. So say yes, be a sponge, and definitely soak up as many opportunities as you can. The next tip is all about networking. And when I talk about networking, I want to take it one step further. Networking is important, but I would say meaningful networking is even more important. Now, in my role at Google, as I mentioned, I work very closely with students. There's a lot of networking, whether that be university open days, careers fairs, industry cocktail evenings. I feel like I'm networking in my sleep a lot of the time. But what I've learned over the years is that networking isn't enough. So it's not enough to make a connection with someone just for the sake of it. You really need to think about what value can you get from this relationship, but also what value is the other person receiving as well. So when you do meet with people, whether it be at an industry networking evening or an open day, really think about what do you want to get out of this connection, but what can you also add to it, and what value can you add? So making sure that you ask the right questions. I actually quite like persistence, so I have a lot of people that will reach out to me on LinkedIn after they meet me at an event or a networking evening, and I quite like that. It shows that they've kind of pushed themselves outside their comfort zone and sent me a message, and really tried to kind of foster that relationship and connection, and that's something that I really like, and it's something that tells me that you're committed to building your career and taking on new opportunities. So I think networking is great, yes, but make sure it's meaningful discussions that you're having. And then the next point is all around your self-promotion tools. So at Google, we run a training called I Am Remarkable, which works with people, particularly from underrepresented groups, who struggle a lot with self-promotion. But what we've learned is actually a lot of people, it doesn't matter who you are or where you're from, self-promotion is hard to achieve, and it's almost like a dirty word, and people feel that they don't want to promote and sell themselves because they'll come across as being arrogant or overconfident. But if you don't sell yourselves, no one else will. So, and one of the quotes that we take from this training that we run at Google is, it's not bragging if it's based on facts. So just remember that. Like, if you're selling things that you've done and it's truthful and it's based on fact, then that's really important. And to be honest, if you want to have a successful career, you need to learn this kind of uncomfortable skill of self-promotion, because without it, it's going to be really hard for other people to know the value that you add and the hard work that you've done if you're not able to sell it yourself. Now, when we talk about self-promotion, I think there's two key tools that you can use. The first one is your resume. Now at Google, believe it or not, we don't actually accept cover letters. Not to say, like, I'm sure a lot of other companies do, and cover letters are important, but because of the sheer volume of applications that we get, we only ask for a resume. And we ideally want your resume to be 1 page, 2 pages maximum. So that's a very small amount of real estate for you to really sell yourself. for you to get across your personal brand in writing, on paper. So really think about using that real estate on the CV wisely. Of course, education and work experience is always going to be important to employers, and that's always probably the first thing they're going to look for. But you should also use your CV as your personal marketing tool. So we really want to know who you are as a person outside of your experience, like what makes you you. So really important to almost tell the story of what makes you an individual in your CV, because that's something that's really interesting to recruiters, and that's something that's going to make you stand out from others as well. And then the second one is LinkedIn. Now, I actually didn't get a LinkedIn until after I finished my studies. I was working in the hotel in Sydney at Sheraton-on-the-Park, and my manager said to me, "Jackson, why don't you have a LinkedIn?" And to be honest with you, I didn't really know much about LinkedIn at that point. This was a fair few years ago. But what I'd recommend to all of you is, even from day one of studies, build a LinkedIn profile, because you'd be surprised the power that your LinkedIn profile can really have. So a part of my role is I do a lot of headhunting. And so we have people in our team that will literally sit on LinkedIn all day. They'll do keyword searches and sift through profiles. And when they see a strong LinkedIn profile, they'll actually reach out to you and try and headhunt you for a role at Google. So if you're not on there, it's very hard to be seen. And think about the types of roles that you want to go for, and make sure your LinkedIn is really reflective of that. So make sure that any skills or experience that you would need to be successful in a role, make sure that's highlighted very clearly on your LinkedIn. And then finally, I know I've given a lot of quotes from successful entrepreneurs and business owners, but the last quote that I wanted to leave you is actually from my dad, who I actually look up to a lot, and he is probably the reason why I've studied ICMS in the first place, and why I'm here today speaking to you all. And what he says, which at first I used to find a bit annoying, but I've come to love this quote, is, if people are talking about you, it's a good thing. It's, if they aren't talking about you, that's when you need to be worried. So, growing up, going through high school, I obviously got bullied, and I used to go home and tell my dad, oh, they're talking about me, they're saying mean things. And he'd say, "Jackson, it's a good thing. If no one was talking about you, then you need to be worried." So think about that. And the reason why I have used this quote, and you're probably thinking, how does this apply to personal branding, is that when you're thinking about building your personal brand and working out what your value proposition is, you really need to think about what makes you you, and how do you differentiate from others. So, if 100 people interview for a role, why should you get it over them? What value can you add to a company like Google or any other company that you apply for? Because we talk about this concept of diversity and inclusion, which is a bit of a hot topic in the world at the moment, and particularly in the tech industry. It's something that a lot of companies are working towards, because it's such an important thing. And if I think about Google's hiring philosophy, we don't necessarily want to hire the smartest students or the top of the class, but we want to hire diverse perspectives, because the key to innovation and growth is having diversity, is not just hiring the same person all the time, but looking for diversity of thought, of background. So just know that you're different from everyone else that sits with you in a classroom at ICMS, or everyone else that goes for an interview next to you and waiting in the waiting room. You're different from them. Diversity, we're all diverse, we're all different, but it's really about honing in on what's your value proposition, and what value can you add. And that's something that has definitely helped me be successful, really knowing kind of what sets me apart from others. And that's kind of, I guess, got me to where I am today. So that's pretty much it. That's my 5 top tips for building a strong personal brand. I hope this was useful. I hope this got you thinking about what your value proposition or what your personal brand is. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the sessions this afternoon at the ICMS Open Day. And thank you very much.